We begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Lamed Hey. Begin on the bottom of Lamed Dal and the Beis, 6 lines up on the bottom of the Yamud, where the Gemara, 8 lines, where the Gemara begins its discussion regarding the previous Mishnah, which was comparing and contrasting the liability one has versus that of what his shiur does. If they do the same action, sometimes he'll be chayiv, and if through his shiur will be potter, and sometimes the exact other way. Today's daf should be a schus achin b'nei Yisrael, and it's all throughout the entire world. So discussing today's daf are mekalkel b'Shabbos. When one does a destructive act on Shabbos, so generally that is potter, because of it has to be a constructive act, but there are 2 exceptions that the Gemara talks about. Kimli b'Ramene is the law that when one is liable for something more severe, let's say death, so then he's going to be potter from, let's say, a monetary liability. Kavan l'beish is that a person to be chayav for the liability of embarrassing someone has to be where the person has intent to embarrass the person. However, we'll see that possibly even if you're just intending to damage is also included, like the kavan for beishas. The halacha mom and the when you have money that's in a situation of doubt, so we have generally the halacha of a mitzvah which is what you want to collect, you have to bring proof. However, there is the opinion of Sumchas that says whenever you have mammon basafik, it's going to be chalk and you're going to divide the money. And the halacha of tanachit v'hayd b'sarim, what happens if someone claims wheat, the guy denies the wheat, but he admits, I owe you barley. So how does that stand up regarding to halacha of moed miktzis, of like, well, partial admission, but really he's totally denying the claim, but he's admitting something else? How do we understand and come out with the person's responsibility? So we begin the current daf, the bottom of Lamadam and Beis. We had said in the Mishnah that there are certain things that you chayiv for what your shiur does, but your pot of you yourself do, and certain things that your pot of your shiur does, you chayiv on what you do. Mishnah says kitzad. So let's say if the ox injures his parents, he's mechayiv. If he injures his parents, he can be potter. Or let's say similar, if his ox burns up a pile of grain on Shabbos, he can be chayiv. If he does it on Shabbos, he can be potter, because since those 2 cases in mischayiv benafshay for injuring his parent or violating the Shabbos, so that's a halacha of kimli b'Ramene, which is that he's going to get the more severe of the 2. Versus when his ox does, he's not chayiv for chil Shabbos, and therefore he's chayiv for the monetary liability. And then you have certain cases that he's potter for what his ox does, but he's chayiv for himself. So let's say his ox embarrasses someone, he's potter. If he embarrasses someone, he's going to be chayiv. Or if his ox blinds up the eye of a slave and knocks out the tooth, so he's chayiv for the monetary liability. If he does it, he's going to be potter, because that's only halacha if the other does. But if he blinds the eye or knocks out the tooth, then he's going to be chayiv. So now the Gemara brings a teaching that will relate back to the halacha of our Mishnah. Tana Rabbi Kamed Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi taught a brayso in front of Rabbi Yechanan as follows: Kol hamakalkalin, all destructive acts are paturin, are exempt regarding the halacha of Shabbos, because like we said on Shabbos, is lamates malachas are constructive acts. If it's destructive, one is patur. Chutz, there's 2 exceptions. Michayvel, someone inflicts a wound, umavir, and if he burns something, which, as the Gemara explains the reason Mesechtes Shabbos and Perek Oirig, for the fact that we need a pasuk to say you're allowed to do a bris milah on Shabbos. We learned that from a pasuk by Yom Hashmini, by Yom even on the 8th day. The inference is that other acts of chavala, which is what that would be the problem about bris milah, would be that the child bleeds, is it's creating chavala. Obviously, that generally you're going to be chayiv. Well, but that's an act of kilkul. So obviously you see that a kilkul by chavala is chayiv. And also from the fact that the Torah has to tell you that burning the bas kohen was mazana, that you're not do that on Shabbos, which is mekalkal. So the inference is that mekalkal bavar is going to be chayiv. For example, let's say you burn the vessel, which is mekalkal, you just totally destroy it, that even so you're going to be chayiv on Shabbos. So that was the brayso that Rabbi Vo was teaching in front of Rabbi Yechanan. So Tais has a whole discussion regarding whose Tanoic opinion is this going like. Al Kaponim, that's what he told him, that if it's mekalkal, it's pater, except for these 2. That Rabbi Yechanan says to him, Puk tani lebra, go out, teach this outside, because chayvel amaver, the halacha of mekalkal being chayiv by chayvel amaver, ain't a Mishnah, is not a Mishnah, because there it's also going to be pater if it's mekalkal, if it's a destructive act. And ve'imtim tzilem a Mishnah, and if you want to say that it is a Mishnah, it's not the way you're understanding. It's not a totally destructive act. How so? Isn't chayvel, isn't a wound, making a wound by someone, a totally destructive act? No, because that's b'tzarich l'kalbei. That's mekalkel amanas latakin, is a destructive act with a purposeful act, because you will need the blood to give your dog to eat. Which Rashi points out, although there are cases of inflicting a wound with the blood not coming out to give to the dog. For example, let's say it bubbles up under the skin, like someone gets black and blue mark, which is a chavala, and is not, you don't have to give to the dog. Says Rashi, that's for a different liability. That's because of tseveya, of dying, which is you're getting a nice color. So akapanim, but the halach of chayvel is only because it has somewhat of a tikkun, and so to maver. When you're burning, it's b'tzarch lafari, where you need the ashes. So Rabbi Yochanan, don't tell me that you're saying, oh, the Mishnah says that these two malachas, you're going to be chayiv, either destructive acts. We see that even though it's mekalkel, you're going to be chayiv. No, there is somewhat of a tikkun over here, giving it to the dog, or that needing the ashes. However, the Gemara now asked Rabbi Yochanan from the halacha of our Mishnah. That's why he brought this in. It's not, we learned in the Mishnah, so we had this contrast regarding the when you're going to be patur or chayiv on ma'aseh asman, ma'aseh shar. So one of the cases that the Mishnah described was if his ox burns up someone else's pile of grain on Shabbos, he's going to be chayiv. But if he goes and he himself goes and lights a fire on Shabbos and burns up someone else's pile of grain, he's going to be patur because it's kim l'b'dramene, because he's chayiv for misa, and therefore he's not going to be chayiv for the moment. Says the Gemara, we're comparing and contrasting him vis-a-vis his ox. Now, Ma Shaira, if you're saying that both of them went and burned up someone's pile of grain on Shabbos, well, just like his ox did, like Kabaile, he doesn't need the ashes. An ox doesn't need anything. He doesn't know what he's doing. So as you continue top of Lamed Hem and Alf, Afunami like Kabaile. That must mean that he also doesn't need the ashes that he's burning up this pile of grain. And it's a mekalkel, it's a total destructive act. Ooh, v'katani pater, and still we learned that you're going to be exempt from the monetary payment. Why? They should need the menavshay, because he's chayiv misa. Wait a second, chayiv misa by havara, but that was with no remedy, with no purpose. It was totally mekalkel act, because the shiur wasn't doing it. And then you're comparing that to the person himself. So you see, seemingly, now like Rabbi Yochanan, you see a totally destructive act would be mechayev you. So on that says the Gemara, loy, no, it's not the way you're learning it. It's shayrei dumi didei. Don't tell me him similar to the shayr. It's a shayr similar to him, which is mahu de kabayile, like Rabbi Yochanan holds, just like the person has to be talking about where he does need it, and so there's somewhat of a tikkun. So to his ox is talking about that he needs it, which Rashi says that's not necessarily, because even if the ox did not need it, of course the owner of the ox is mechayev for having him burnt up someone else's pile of grain on Shabbos. It's just by default, and that's the point of the Gemara, both of them have to be talking about the same type of a case, and saying this one will be chayev and this case will be pater, because that's what the Mishnah sounds like it's saying, that in the place where this one's going to be chayev, this one's going to be pater. Because if the shayr is talking about that it doesn't need the ashes, then it wouldn't make sense to say that there's a case that you be chayiv amaisa shayra and be pater amaisa atzmai. Because if it's talking about again where the ox doesn't need it, him when he doesn't need it is actually not pater. He is chayiv according to Rabbi Yochanan, because you wouldn't be pater because of kimli rabbini, because you wouldn't be chayiv misa because there's no tikkun at all. It'd be total mekalkel, and Rabbi Yochanan is total mekalkel is pater. Burning it. Burning is when you light a fire. Is burning the. It's burning the match. Is whatever it is. It's havara is. You try and say it happens at different times. You mean to say when? I'm saying if you take a fire which is already pre-existing and you put onto the guy's pile of grain. Right. Right, but when you went and you put that fire onto the pile of grain, you're burning up. That's havuda. And that's the same Maisa that's burning up his grain. When you take an existing fire, you don't have to make it a new fire. It's not like on Yom Tov we have halacha, have moiled. You're not supposed to create a fire. When you take any fire, pre-existing fire, and you burn up something else, you're doing havar. You're burning up that thing. Right. That would be another Maisavar. So whatever it is, Yichayv Misa for that same act of burning up his stuff. So you would get the more severe. You would Yichayv Misa on that also, yeah, in the Chanami. But I'm saying that that's you have to know that what type of Kamla Biravanes there are. Place on the bottom actually of this Amid Ben Shing. Maybe it talks about 3 different types of categories in a certain halacha and regarding the Yinachayv Misa Mammon Akapanim. So here you're saying that you're not when you burn up his pile of grain, which you chayav ha'avara, so you're not going to be chayav for the monetary liability. But Akapanim, the Gemara says this is not difficult in Rabbi Yochanan because it's not saying didei dumi d'shayrei, it's shayrei dumi didei, which is just like him. No, he needs it. His ox also needs it. So the Gemara says shayrei hechem mishkachas la. Okay, good answer. What does that mean? How does it mean the ox needs like the ashes that you're saying he's gonna be chayiv? So Amalei Rav Avia says, what are we talking about? We're talking about where he's an intelligent ox. He got a bite in his back. He wants to burn it. And roll around in ashes. And so he needs it. So it is a not a totally destructive act because it's a manas l'sakin. Oh, and that's why when the guy himself does it, he's gonna be potter because he's chayiv misa because it's not a totally destructive act. Says the Gemara, but wait a second, Mano Yadinan. How do we know that was the ox's intent? That the Mishnah had to tell us that even though the master in such a situation will be potter from tashlumin because the Kimel Rabbi the ox is gonna be chayiv. Because if we don't know any way, even the master would be chayiv in tashlumin if we don't know that he needs it for the ashes to be chayiv misa. And if that's the case, so you don't have to be saying yesh chayiv ma'aser shari upata ma'aser asma because for himself he would be chayiv. It's only if you know definitively. Then the master himself will be potter because he's chayiv for the misa. But that would mean to say that the equivalent of the potter of the ox, of the chayiv of the tashlum of the ox, has to be that we know. How do we know that the ox is doing this with intent for a constructive purpose? Says the Gemara, because the Labasa de Kalya, after that he burnt up the guy's pile of grain, Kamagan, the Bakut, we see him rolling around the ashes. So you could tell that this was the intelligence of the ox, that he had this in mind when he burnt it, and therefore that's why that's such a case. But says the Gemara, Mika Haigavna, is there really such a case? I mean, it's a very nice pshat, but is there such a thing? Says the Gemara, and yes, there was an ox, that have a papa that was in the household of a papa, that have a koivin leichinche. His teeth were hurting him. So Aili went up, upaske lenazyasa. He pushed off the cover of the vessel that the beer was inside. V'shasi shech, and he drank the beer, vitas, and he was healed. So you see that animals could have intelligence for things like this to do purposeful actions, and they're. No, but they knew the teeth were hurting from this animal. No, they knew. You could tell when the animal's teeth are hurting. I'm saying
he just was doing it.
I hear. As the Gemara thinks to say that would seem to indicate that this does prove that he was purposeful about what he was doing. Right? That's a good point. Right? That's a good point. You could say, right, does his intent to damage, right? Or do you say circumstantial? Right? I hear. So the Gemara now asks on what we had said before. Amr Rabbana Kamei Papa. The rabbi said in front of Papa, Mimetzisa Amr, can you really say Shayrei Dumi Didei? Your whole answer was that no, it's not Didei Dumi Shayrei. It's his ox similar to him. And you're saying that we're comparing the cases just like him. Yes, Rabbi Yochanan holds has to be a manas l'sakin. The shor is also manas l'sakin, as we just explained. But are really these cases comparing him similar to the ox, meaning the ox similar to him? But Vaktani, one of the cases of our Mishnah was shoyrei shabiyish pater. The ox embarrasses someone, is going to be exempt, the owner of the ox. But who shabiyish, if he embarrasses someone, the Mishnah says chayim, the person's going to be chayiv. Says the Gemara. Shoyrei, this is you're saying his ox, if he does it, the owner is going to be potter. You tell me Dumya is going to be similar to the liability of Didei, of the guy himself? How could you have such a thing? But the owner's liability of bush is only if niskav and levayish, only if he had an intent to embarrass the other person. How could you have that? An ox doesn't have das, like you're asking, but doesn't have das for what? To have intent to embarrass someone. That's an emotion. For emotional damage, that the Gemara is assuming he doesn't have. He could have intent for certain things, let's say for his physical necessities, but for embarrassment, if you're saying it's shoyre dumi didei, how do you understand these other cases? Says the Gemara, it's kagoyin sheniskav and lahazik. Where the ox had intent to damage, where that we know that he could have intent for that, like you pointed out was Karen, whereby a person in that equivalency would be chayav for busha, even though he's not intending to embarrass. Because Amamah, like the master says when he brought this in Daf Chav and Aleph, niskav and lahazik, if someone intends to damage, av bishla niskav and labayish, even though he did not intend to embarrass, but as long as you intend to damage, you're already going to be liable for busha. Intending to damage includes all those other things. Doctor bills, loss of work, shame, all those things are included. And therefore the shiur could have kavanah to be mazik. So although he can't have kavanah to be embarrassing, to shame someone, but to damage, yes, and therefore it could be shiur dumi didei, that just like the person has that intent, so too the animal could have that intent. Now Rav Amay gives a whole different approach regarding the original question we asked. He says the truth is, the halacha of our Mishnah is where, you're right, when they burnt up the pile of grain of this other person, they didn't need the ashes. As we said, the shur doesn't need it, so we said, Didei dumi d'shayre. And the reason why you're going to be patur from tashlumin if the master does it is not because, you're right, is michayev misa, because according to Rabbi Yechanan, since it's not a constructive act at all, it's a totally destructive, he holds you're going to be patur from misa. So therefore you'd be chayev for tashlumin. So then, why would you be patur from tashlumin if it's a totally destructive act according to Rabbi Yechanan? Says Rav a different approach. He says masnit in the halacha of our Mishnah is even b'shaygig, where if the guy did it by mistake, where there's no chiyuv of misa, we could still explain that he's going to be patur from tashlumin. How so? When the Torah b'chizkiah, like we was taught in the Brayso of Chizkiah, the Torah b'chizkiah, the pasuk says meyikra maka adam maka b'hema. Now that's not the actual words of the pasuk. The actual words of the pasuk are Makei nefesh behema yishalmen. Well, Rashi brings down one thing. Some bring down the pasuk of Makei behema yishalmen and Makei adam yumas. Rashi's words are Makei nefesh behema yishalmen. But be that as it may, the pasuk appears hitting, which Taisa explains can mean either killing or hitting, depends on the context of an animal and of hitting a person, killing a person. So what do you learn out from that? So Makei behema, just like when someone injures an animal, you're always going to pay, even if you did it by mistake. The pasuk does not differentiate between if you did it by mistake, you did it deliberately, you did it with intent, you did not do it with intent, whether you did it going up, going down, that the halacha is never going to be to say that you're going to be exempt from the monetary liability. You're always going to be liable for what you did, even if you did it by mistake. As we say, that adamud la'ilam, a person's always going to be considered liable for what he did, as we said on Daf Chavav. Afmaki adam. So too, when someone kills a person, that the pasuk is going to exempt him from a monetary payment because it says you must. So the one who killed him gets killed. So it'll always be pater. And like tachli, there you don't differentiate either. By him being shaygig lemezid, whether he does it by mistake or does it deliberately. Meaning, even when he does b'shaygig, where he's not going to get killed. But since if he would do it b'mezid, he's in the parsha of Misa, you're already going to be exempt from the monetary payment, as we say, because the Kimli Rabbin. And Taisa discusses all the three things we're going to say. First of all, being shagul amazed, there's no difference. Being miskav and the shame miskav doesn't make a difference between with intent or not intent. And whether he was on his way down, whether he was on his way up, which means to say on your way up means to say that's killing someone in a backhanded way, because it's when he's lifting up his axe, which the Gemara Makas Daf Zayin and Beis tells us that actually in that type of case you're patur from galus, because that's considered more honest than not, versus on your way down. But be that as it may, in all these cases, we don't differentiate l'chayiv and mammon, that we're never going to have you liable for the money, and l'poitrim and mammon, only rather we're going to exempt you from money. And that's what we're saying, even so you can be potter from tashlumin. Oh, so therefore, by Chil Shabbos also, even if you burnt up this guy's pile of grain by mistake, you can be potter to pay. Why? Not chayv misa. I thought Rabbi Yochanan says, we said that regarding if it's totally mekalkal, they potter from misa. Yeah, but since this is, it could even be that, let's say, there was a manas l'saken. But the point is that it was done b'shaygig. And therefore, even though you're right, you're going to be potter from misa, you'll still be potter from tashlumin. Because that's the teaching of Tana Bechizkiah, that automatically, if it's in something that could have brought about chiyav misa, even though you're not getting it, you may potter from monetary payment. The Amalei Rabban the Rabban, however, said the Rava who said this pshat, can you really say that the case of our Mishnah is where he did it by mistake and is going based on Tana Bechizkiah? But the words of the Mishnah are, because he's going to be liable for his life, therefore he's going to be potter from tashlumin. But based on what you're saying, he's not getting killed. He did it b'shaygig. So says Rabbi, no hachim, and this is what the Mishnah is saying. Since when he does deliberately, he's chayiv misa. And what case would that be talking about? When he needs it for the ashes. So hashta now b'shaygig potter. Now when he does that by mistake, which that's the machlik is Rishonim exactly how we explain the Gemara. If it's talking about that vayla far or not, but it's not kind of contradict Rabbi Yochanan, because here that he's doing by b'shagi anyway is going to be potter. So it could even be talking about that you need the ashes or you don't need the ashes. But if you would have done it b'mezid and you needed the ashes, you'd be chayv misa. So therefore, here when he does b'shagig, he's going to be potter. So halacha the next Mishnah, continuing on this theme of shur hamazik. So it says the Mishnah like this: if you have an ox that was running after another ox, and the ox that was being pursued got injured. Now they start pointing fingers. The victim claims, your ox damaged my ox. Look, it has this big gash over here. It's from your animal. The other owner says, no, it's not true. It's like your animal was running, he tripped on the rock, and he got injured. Nothing to do with my animal. Halach is a mitzvah mechaber al baraya. The one who's trying to extract money from his friend. It's the proof. The onus of the proof is on him. So if he wants to collect, he has to prove undoubtedly that this happened from the shar hamazik. Now, another case is, let's say how yushnaim right from acher echad. Let's say there were two oxen running after. We see bullying happens even with the oxen, running after this one ox. And these three oxen are owned by three different people. This one says, your ox damaged. And he's pointing a finger at him. He says, no, your ox is the one that damaged this ox. They're both exempt because both of them could push him away and say, it wasn't me. Now, but let's say both of these oxen were owned by the same owner, then shneim chayavim. Then they're both liable, which the Gemara is going to explain what does that mean, that they're both liable. It's owned by one person, but there's two oxen that but al kapam he's going to be liable for that damage then. Now, hoya echad gadol ve'echad katan. Let's say one was a bigger animal and one was a smaller animal. Now, it's important to understand what the claims of each one is. The victim is saying that it was the bigger animal that injured my animal. Now, what's the significance of that? Because when we talk about shur tam, we know that you could only collect from the body of the shur hamazik. So the bigger animal has in its intrinsic value half of the damage worth. But Mazik says no. Loiki ela cotton hizik. He says not true. It was my smaller animal that damaged. There was the two animals that were running after this guy. There was a bigger one and a smaller one. And he says you could take the value of the smaller one, and the excess of the chatzin nezik you're going to lose. So that's the claims that they're making. Or let's say echad tam echad mud. Let's say one is a tam and one is a mood. Hanizikram, the victim says mood hizig. That's much better for him. If the mood damage, you can collect from whatever assets this guy has. The Mazikram says loiki elatam hizig. He says no, it's a tam. Whatever value this tam is, that's all you're going to get. The Allah in all these cases are the one who's trying to collect. The onus of proof is on him. He has to prove which one it is. If not, so we'll see in the Gemara exactly. It would sound like he'll just get the lesser of the two. Says the Mishnah further. Let's say there are actually two victims. One ox was a bigger ox. One ox was a smaller ox that got injured. And the damager was also two oxen. One bigger, one smaller. So here also, the victim is saying like this. This is the claim he's making. He's saying, Gadol hizigas hagadol. Says the bigger one is one that damaged the bigger one. But cotton is a cotton, the smaller one damaged the smaller one. But Mazakam says, like, it's not true. Cotton es hagadol. He says it was actually the smaller one that injured the bigger one. Now, even though the chatzi nezek of the bigger one is going to be a larger amount, says the Mazik, you're going to only be able to take that from my smaller ox, which very likely won't be able to cover your chatzi nezek. But the gadol es cotton. It was the bigger one that injured the smaller one. So yeah, the chatzi nezek could be a small one that you can take from my big one, which obviously is better for the Mazik, where he'll be able to cover and he won't necessarily be paying for everything. Or let's say similarly echad tam echad mud. One of the two oxen, one was a tam, one was a mud. So nizikam, the victim says mud hizik is a gadol. That's much better for him. The mud, which is you could collect from whatever assets he has, injured the bigger one. He won't lose out, and he'll get nezik shalom. But tam is a cotton. But it was the shir tam that injured the small one. Okay, that damage is small. Half the damages, and only from the guf. That's small. Amazakam says like no, it's not true. Tam is a gadol. No, it's the shir tam that injured the big one. So I'm only paying chatzi nezik. I'm only paying megufay. A mood as a cotton. And it was the mood that injured the smaller one. It says the Mishnah whoever's trying to collect, the onus to prove is on him. Now the Gemara says that Amar Chibur Abba Zoyse Meres. Now halacha of our Mishnah tells us the following halacha: that chalukim lav chaveros al sumchas. Obviously, the colleagues of sumchas disagreed with him. Why? What are you talking about? Because the Gemara tells us later on the Mevav Mabeis in the Brisa and the Gemara in Perek Shosh Nagach Chesapara that sumchas says mammon hamutal b'safek. When you have money that's in a situation of doubt, the halacha is chalkin, that you divide the money. Now Taisus qualifies this. Obviously, it's not any time that you have a doubt, because if a guy's wearing a jacket, another guy says, "Hey, that's my jacket," we don't know. We're not going to say chalkin. Taisus qualifies exactly. But upon them, when you have a definite doubt, without their claims, the court's not sure. So then Allah is going to be divided. And from our Mishnah, you see not like that. You see that the halacha is that you have to, the onus of proof, you have to prove, and you don't just divide it. So now Rabbi says, wait a second. You think Amr Sumchas, you said Sumchas said is teaching a filabari or buddy? Even when both of them have a definite claim? Meaning, even when the defendant says, "Oh, I know that I don't owe you." Even so, since regarding the court, we're not sure if you're saying the truth, we're going to divide it. That you're saying that the Mishnah is not like Sumchas? Our Mishnah was, both were saying, yeah, I know Zicha, it was this. And this guy says, no, Zicha was this. So, you're saying they disagree with Sumchas, because Sumchas says, no, Chalkin. Did Sumchas say his shita, even when it's a bari and bari, that when each one is definite, the nitfa and the teveya is that the nitfa is going to lose that half? Says Amalei in, he says yes. Amar Simchas avila bari bari. Simchas said it's halacha even when it's a definite claim on both sides. But then the Gemara asks, wait, the Gemara is like going back, like asking a reflective question. That how do you know the Mishnah is talking about that both are saying a definite claim, that you're saying and you're asking that the Chacham who say disagree on Sumchas, and you want to prove that Sumchas would generally hold the Cholkin, that the Chacham are disagreeing because you're saying the Chacham disagree, even Bari Bari. Where did you see our Mishnah was talking about Bari? How do you know that each one was saying that the Mazik was, that the Nizik was saying, I know for sure, and the Mazik was saying, I know for sure? It says, because you can tell me, what are the words in Mishnah? This guy was making a claim that your ox damaged, which sounds definite, not saying maybe. And the mazik was saying loy ki, no but, which sounds like that was obvious to him that he knew definitively that he got injured on the rock. Which just explains, although other places we say the word loy ki and it's not definite, that's because we know for sure that it doesn't mean that. But here, where it would possibly mean that, you wouldn't use the terminology unless you were saying it that it's because of definite claim. So therefore, our Mishnah is bari bari, and the Chama saying Cholkin are saying Mitzvah Cholbari, and that's what saying that they're disagreeing on Simchas because Simchas says his sheet of Cholkin even by bari bari. The Maskevler Papa asks on this, and he says, wait a second. Midireisha, from the fact that, as you just said, from the opening halacha of the Mishnah, as you proved loiki is bari bari is when each one's making a definite claim. He says your ox injured mine. He says no, it tripped on the rock. So seif nami bari bari. So that would sound like that. The end of the Mishnah is also bari bari. But the problem is ema sefer. Let's look later onto the Mishnah. It seems to be difficult. Why? The Mishnah says like this: right? If let's say there were two oxen chasing after this guy's ox. One was a bigger one. One was a smaller one. This is going the victim says gadol hizik. It was your bigger ox that damaged. The mazik says, "Look, it was only the smaller one." Or let's say echatam echad mud. The two oxen that were chasing his one ox, one was a tam, one was a mud. Nizigam mud hizik. The victim says it was the mud that damaged. The mazik says, "Look, tam hizik." No, it was the tam that damaged. What do we say in the Mishnah? He said, "Look, the victim you want to collect, you're trying to claim was the bigger one. It was the mud one. You have to bring a right. You have to bring a proof." Says the Gemara, the inference is, haloi maisi raya, but it sounds like if, let's say, he would not have brought a proof to the victim, what happens then? What's the halacha? Shakal kodam mazik. It sounds like, okay, he'll take like the mazik says. So he'll collect not from the mud, he'll collect from the tam. He'll collect from the smaller one, not from the big one. Wait a second. Even though the victim is saying, I know for sure that this didn't damage my ox. Because he's saying bari. I know for sure it was the muad. I know for sure it was the bigger one. No. It's not like you're saying that it was the smaller one of the tam. Right? That's what it means bari. He's saying, I know for sure. So based on that, says the Gemara, if you're saying he's still going to take the way the mazik says, which is from the smaller one or from the tam one, based on this, we could extrapolate a question on a different man Amar. Name it to Rabbi Nassan. Shall we say this refutes Rabbi Nassan? Why? What does Rabbi Nassan say? Amar, he says, Tanu chitim. If let's say a guy comes to someone else, he says, Shmuel, you owe me wheat. I lent you a bushel full of wheat. He says, Chaim, I don't know what you're talking about. I owe you barley. I don't owe you no wheat. What's the halacha? So he says, Potter. He's going to be exempt even from the monetary value of the barley. Why? Because the claimant is saying to him, I never give you barley. I give you wheat. On that, you're kaifer hakal. You're totally denying. So what you're admitting to, I'm Michael, because I'm saying, you don't owe me that. So you're Potter. If that's the case, our Mishnah seems to be saying you'd be chayiv, because you're telling me the Mishnah is bari, which is definite, is 100%, not 85%, not 90%. Ich weiß, this is gewein. It's gewein the mid was getin, gewein the gresser the one that did it, and he's saying no, it was the smaller one, it was the tam one, and the Mishnah is saying, okay, you have to bring proof. Okay, until you bring proof, what's halacha? Okay, you get the lesser of the two. The lesser two. That's not like him. That's not like the opinion of Rabbi Nassan, who says that you're put in such a case. So Ella rather says the Gemara must be, if we want to resolve Rabbi Nassan, with Bari V'Shema. Must be talking about not bari. I mean, which refutes the whole point we wanted to say up until now. We wanted to prove that Sumchis is disagreeing with the Chachamim even on bari, because the Mishnah is Tumar Keza bari, and they're saying and not Chalkin. You don't see that. Because the Mishnah must be talking about Bari B'Shema. So you must say, wait a second. It's a monetary claim of Chitin, and he's admitting Sarim. And here's a monetary claim of... Right. But when this guy admits to... Right. But when the guy admits to the sa'irin, does he have to pay at least the sa'irin?
I understand.
He doesn't.
It boils down to money at the end.
Right.
But it's two different products. It's like a different story.
Right. This is also two different stories. Because you're saying this ox did it and this one didn't do it. And I'm saying, no, this ox did it, not this one. So, meaning if you look at the vantage point of the nizik, the nizik is saying, you don't owe me for this at all. Don't worry about your shiur tam. Didn't do anything to me. It's the same thing as him saying, don't worry about the barley. You don't owe me no barley. Even though he's admitting to this. He's admitting my shiur tam did it. He's admitting I owe you barley. Nah, you potter. Let's discuss regarding potter, the mom and potter, the shvu, but upon him, he's potter. So obviously the Mishnah must be talking about Bar V'Shema. So the Gemara, not Bari because that wouldn't make sense then with Rabbi Barnasan. Oh wait. So the Gemara is going to get to that in a second. So the Gemara first let's understand what the case says the Gemara Bar V'Shema. The Kama Bari man, the Kama Shem man. Okay, wait, you don't like Bari because that would be typical in Rabbi Barnasan. So rather Bari V'Shem. Who's the Bari? Who's the Shema? Says the Gemara. Inem, if he says as follows, the Kama Nizik Bari, that meaning the victim. He's definite. He says, I know which shar of yours damaged my shar. Become a mazik shema, and the mazik is saying, maybe. I don't know. And even so, you're telling me that then the victim could collect from the tam. Wait a second, akati lema. Then you should still say, and all the more so, you should say, Tavet Yuf to Rabbi Barnasan, that refutes Rabbi Barnasan. Why? Because how can you tell me that the nizik is going to go ahead and get from what the mazik is admitting to? He's not even fully admitting even. And the nizik is definite that it was not that one. So why would you be chayiv? Why would he be getting the lesser of the amount? For sure he shouldn't get in such a case. Taylor rather says, no, it would be the other way around. The common nizik shema. The victim, he's the main one, because if he's bari, he doesn't deserve the other thing. Because he's saying, snish gevendus. The victim is admitting it wasn't that animal. So then you pater. So no, the nizik was shema. The nizik was like, maybe it was Yomud. Maybe it was the bigger one. He's hoping. Become a mazik bari. The mazik, no. Sorry, brother. For sure that it was the tam. For sure the smaller one. Oh, so like Rashi explains, since the nizik is saying maybe, he's really claiming from both of them. Because his maybe is the bigger one. So when he doesn't bring proof, yes, I'll take from the smaller one. I'll take from the tam. So it's not like the case of Rabbi Barnasan when he's only Tana Chitin and he's saying, don't worry, you don't owe me any sarim. The equivalent in the case of Chitin sarim would be, he says, maybe you owe me Chitin. No, maybe sarim also, maybe Chitin. Yeah, do you owe me Chitin? I said, no, Chitin, brother, no. So I owe you. Okay, fine. Then he would agree to be chayiv. He's not being meichel on the sarim. He's not saying you don't for sure owe me. It's a maybe. So that would be the case of the sefer. Oh, so says the Gemara. So the sefer nizik shema mazik bar. So in fact, the sefer is talking about where the victim is maybe and the mazik is definite. So they shenami comes out that the ratios also. We're back to the question. Nizik shema. The victim is saying maybe your ox damaged, and not the rock. Mazik bari, the mazik's no. Says I know for sure your ox got injured on the rock. So the Gemara is saying, wait a second. Now this is difficult. Because you think even over there, you think even over there, Sumchas said that you would divide because it's a suffix. The itzach that we would need the Rabbanah to disagree and lashmin and delay and to tell us that you don't split and just say Raya. How could you think to say that when the nizik is shema and a mazik is bari, that he didn't do it? A guy comes up to you and says, I think maybe your car smashed into my car. It looks like the paint of your car. And the guy says, are you crazy? I wasn't even there today in the parking lot. So he comes to Bez, and then the Rabbunim say, Taka, it's a suffix. You're saying like this, you're saying like this? Cholkin. Who would ever have him in there when the nizik is a shema, maybe, and the mazik is a bari, which is discussed. Why you go with bari b'shema, but Bava Kama, but no one entertained. So if you're telling me that chalukin of chaveda val sumchis, and that's what I'm teaching us by saying mitzvah raya. What you think? Sumchis? You just showed me it can't be bari from the sefer. Sefer has to be bari b'shema. With the nizik saying maybe, and the mazik saying no, I know for sure I didn't, or whichever one it was the smaller one, whatever. So the reisha also has to be bari b'shema. The nizik, the victim, is maybe, and the mazik's no, for sure not. And the chacham say mitzvah raya, but what is this chaluk in the love sumchas chaver val sumchas? Sumchas wouldn't say chaluk in such a situation. So how do you even read that this is what the Mishnah is coming to tell us? Says the Gemara, no, it's not true. You're right. The Seifa is Nizik Shema Mazik Bari, like we showed. The Seifa must be talking about where the victim is maybe it was the bigger one of yours, maybe it was the mood of yours. And the Mazik is no. He says, I know for sure it was not. It was the smaller one. So then we're going to say, that he'll get the lesser of the two, and that would not be difficult on Rabbi Bar Nassan, because it's not a Tanu Chitin Hoyle B'Sa'arim. It's Tanu Chitin B'Sa'arim, maybe, whatever. And like he's not sure which one. So again, there's not being moichel on that, and therefore he'll get the lesser of the two. But you're right. Reisha is nizik bari umazik shema. The reisha is actually the opposite. The reisha is when the victim was definite. He's like, I saw your ox. He smashed my ox, and therefore he's bleeding. And the mazik's, I don't know. Maybe the rock did it. I don't know. Oh, that's where Simchas would say that the defendant, the mazik, has a very weak positioning over here. His shema is very weak in regards to the bari claim of the victim. So therefore he would say, yeah, we have a suffix over here, we would divide it. The Rabbanan come to tell us, no, that the defendant always has the upper hand, and you always say alavaraya. So therefore it's really the inverse of the sefer. They're both bari b'shema, but who's the shema switches from the reisha to the sefer. The Gemara says, wait a second, but then you're not making the cases the same. They're not comparable. They're actually almost the exact opposite. So as Rashi explains the Gemara's question, since at the end of the day, you're not telling me that the case of the reisha and sefer are talking about the same type of a case. So wait, you could then go back to Reb Chibra Abba, who wanted to explain the reisha, which you fell off of. He wanted to say that the case is bari, and to show you that sumchas, even by bari and bari, says yachloiku, and that's where the Chama come to disagree with him. So what's Reb Papa's great kasha? That's saying, no, you can't say this because you see from the Sefer of the Mishnah, it's not bari, so it must be bari b'shema. So it can't be like what you're trying to say. You can't prove this is bari. So but how you learn in the Reisha? Oh, bari b'shema, but the exact opposite bari b'shema. That the nizik is bari and the mazik is shema, and the sefer is the other way around. There's the mazik's bari and the nizik. So you're also not saying the same type of case. So what's your greater upslug of saying that the Reisha is talking about bari? So they said, no, it's not true. It is a good upslug. Why? Because bari b'shema and shema bari, it's the same thing. You're right, it's the exact opposite, but they're both bari b'shema. So it makes sense, though, in one Mishnah, we would say these two cases comparatively. But bari, shema bari, tremilin, those are two different things. And that was Rav Papa's question. And if there's no proof that the Chacham disagree to prove that the Shita Sumchas would be, even by bari, yachleiku, could be he would hold ha'maitzah mechaber alavaraya when there's a bari. You don't see that it would hold necessarily that. Maybe when the nizik's bari, the mazik shema, you would say yachleiku. That's a Rav Papa. But if the mazik is bari that it wasn't, maybe he wouldn't say yachleiku. Maybe he would say ha'maitzah mechaber alavaraya. Now, Gufa, the Gemara goes back to discuss, once we brought it in, to discuss this teaching of Amar Rabbi Bar Nassan. Tanachitim b'hoydaloi b'sa'im. If let's say he claims the wheat and he admits to him the barley. So he said, Potter is going to be exempt. So says Gemara, what is he even teaching us? It's Tanin, it's a Mishnah Masechta Shavuos. Mishnah says, Tanachid Mo'ile b'sa'im Potter, the exact halacha. You don't need an Amoira if he makes a claim of wheat, and the guy does not admit to the wheat, admits to something else. he's potter because the claimant is essentially saying, you don't owe me that. Says the Gemara, no. If we only had that Mishnah, I would have been said, I would have interpreted it a certain way. I would have limited it. I would have said, what are you potter from? It doesn't say, it just says potter. I would have said potter medmechitin. I would have said that you potter from the value of the wheat. Essentially meaning to say, of course it's potter from the wheat. No, it's saying that you're potter because you don't have to swear moedim miktzis. Because you're not like a partial admission. On some level, you could read it like a partial admission. You're not admitting to the wheat, you're admitting to barley, which is like half the value. Saying no. We would say that you're koifar koil on the wheat, so that'd be a potter. But I would have said, but what did you admit? You're admitting to barley, so I would say that you're going to be chayiv on that. That's what you needed Amir to say. No, the potter legami, totally exempt. Which the svar we were saying all along, but you wouldn't know that from the Mishnah. The svar is yes, because the claimant himself is pardoning you on that, because he's saying that's not what you owe me. But you wouldn't have known that from the Mishnah that we needed Amir. However, the Gemara asked on Rabbi Nosson from the halacha of our Mishnah. What's the question? Our Mishnah said, let's say there were two victims of oxen. One was big, one was small. And let's say there were two oxen that were chasing them, one big, one small. So he said, the halacha is that the one who wants to collect, he has to bring the proof. Now, says the Gemara, but let's say he doesn't bring a proof. Sounds like, and we had this discussion just before, similarly, Shaku Kodam Mazik. Sounds like, okay, he would take the lesser of the two. It's like the Mazik is saying, wait, amai. This is claiming wheat and the guy admitting to barley. You're claiming that it was the bigger one. He's saying, no, it was the smaller one. When you're saying it was the big one, you're saying, but not the smaller one. And if that's the case, the guy should be potter. Why does the mazik have to pay for the value of the smaller one's damage? And instead of the bigger one, he should be totally potter. Because the victim is saying it wasn't that. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ro lito. The truth is, you have to translate this as it would be fit for him to take if he would have brought a proof. But if he doesn't bring a proof, you're right, he doesn't get anything. And you cannot infer from it, like we wanted in Medayik, that he'll take away how much the mazik admits to. And therefore, we're explaining like this, and we're not explaining it like we had explained the case previously, says Rashi on the top of Lamavam at Aleph, that why don't you just say that the victim was Shema, and the mazik was Bari? So therefore, you'll take like the way the mazik at least admitted to, because he's not saying I know for sure. He's a Shema. Why can't you say that's the case, that he'll get the least of the two amounts? Because if that would be the case, as Rashi, then that's the same thing as what we said before. Why would you need a sefer? So therefore, that's where the Gemara is answering that you're right. Taka wouldn't get anything. It says Gemara, but Tanya will let the Braisa on this. The Braisa says the reason mishtalim, the victim will collect alakot min agadol. He'll only be able to get for the smaller one that got injured from the larger animal. And the bigger one from the small one. I thought you told me he doesn't deserve to get the lesser of the two. You're saying that when it's such a case, it doesn't get anything. So the Gemara the tafas, where you're right, it's talking about where the victim went and grabbed the ox beforehand. Therefore, now he's the muhzik, and we don't know one way or the other. So therefore, he could hold on to it, but that's only if he grabbed the lesser of the two that we say that he could hold on to it. But the Gemara asks, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, similarly, we said, if let's say one was a tam and one was a muad, and then this is a muad, here's a gadol, the victim says, it was a muad that's full damages, that damaged the larger one of mine. The tam is a cotton, and it was the tam that injured the smaller one of mine. The mazik says, no, no, it's the tam that injured the larger one, I'm only going to pay chatzin nezek on that. Muad is a cotton, and it was the muad that damaged the smaller one. So the Mishnah says, so the victim has to bring the proof. Now, again, the same type of question. If it doesn't bring a proof, it sounds like shakal could become a mazik. He takes like the way the mazik says, but why chitin b'sarnin? It's this case of Rabbi Nosson that he's claiming chitin and denying the barley. And this guy's only admitting the barley and denying the wheat. I thought you should be potus. The Gemara answers at top of Lamed Vav Manav. You're right. We're just saying that it would be fit for him to take, but he doesn't get anything. But that says but in the Bryce is not sure. He's a mishtalim. But it says that he gets paid l'katnim and amud l'galim and tam. The smaller one from the mud and the big one from the tam. So the Gemara, the tafas. It's talking about where he grabbed it, and therefore that's where he'll get it. But really, it's ro loy ve'en loy. Anything those things.